When contacting a planetary consciousness, there's not any particular preventatives you need to do ahead of time. I would say that it's more about being mindful of what to expect and simply what planetary consciousnesses are like to speak to. Um, One thing that you'll want to keep in mind is that they are big, and your senses are going to tell you that. So, sometimes the amount of power or energy in quotations that some people seem to sense whenever certain spirits are around is like in the case of the planetary spirits, they're kind of sensing gravity. They are big. Gravity is real, and it has real effects even across space and time. In fact, it has a lot to do with space and time. So a planetary consciousness. First of all, when do you contact the planetary consciousness? That depends on how you're contacting the planetary consciousness. If you have a talisman or some other um, aid, I'm gonna cough. Reverse nutrition. All right. Um, so, when contacting a planetary consciousness, it's common to use something like a talisman or something else that you can use as a tool to aid in the working. It's not always about power. It's simply that because you're mentally going to be dealing with a lot when it comes to the communication, when it comes to this new understanding of how communication and beings work, you're going to have a lot to deal with mentally. And so, well, many magicians are fully capable of forming their tool set psychically. I would suggest having some physical fallbacks for yourself when you do this, especially considering that you are working with actual physical objects in space and the consciousness of these massive objects. They literally are the things that create gravity. So, um, having a physical object to focus on whenever you're doing some sort of ritual to contact them would make a lot of sense. Then you could actually have your physical object resonate with the physical object that is the planet. Um, they uh, really appreciate things that resonate with them and are like them. Color, metals, elements, minerals, gems, um, and of course, deities, symbols, animals. I find especially animals resonate. I think that animals resonate especially because those are also living beings. So they are physically something that can walk around and live on a planet and be enriched by a planet. Um, Same with us, really. As for offerings, it can be a bit complicated because you do ask, like, for instance, how can Neptune receive an offering from me when I'm on Earth? Um, I think it's less about sending a gift and more about having a meeting. Um, Worry about gifts later. Offerings are something that you use to show which way the hospitality leans. But and they're also a key form of diplomacy. You don't really need to worry about a planetary consciousness having a military. Um, it simply is too big to direct itself to do something that exact. Um, that's probably one of the better ways of summing it up. But it would be like imagining the moon's brain trying to attack us. Um, at that point, you're starting to make up things to worry about that are kind of silly. So, um, planetary consciousnesses. Um, you're not limited by astrological timing because it's really impossible to say um, really where they are exactly when you're trying to reach out to them. There are plenty of astrological or astronomical, both really, predictors of where they should be at any given point in time, but you don't actually know for sure that they are really there. You don't know whether an anomaly crossed space and time that's actually thrown off their calculations. Their calculations are based on mathematics and on their estimates of where things will be at a given point, um, with the give and take of gravity thrown in and scaled for mass. But you really have to keep in mind that we don't actually know what's out there beyond um, beyond Pluto. Beyond Pluto, there's another asteroid belt, and then in or beyond that is an expanse where it's still on the edge of our solar system, but it's starting to also reach into outer space. And in that area, scientists believe that there is a large planet that we have not actually located because it's very difficult to actually detect anything out there. Just so much distance and so much space. It gets wider and wider. It kind of goes out like a cone. So there's something out there that has so much gravity that it actually does affect the orbits of our planets just enough that astrologers and astronomers have been remarking on it for hundreds of years now. Sometimes they call it the prima mobile, prime mover. Um, and it's what they expected Pluto to be, but Pluto did not become that because Pluto's far too small to be the prima mobile. So, um, that's kind of why they declassified Pluto as a planet. They're wanting to add prima mobile as the ninth planet, because they're pretty sure that it's out there and it would make a lot of sense for it to be number nine. So when we're feeling stuff out there, we're feeling stuff like Prima Mobile and Neptune and Jupiter the most. Big stuff. That's why we're able to feel the stuff that's way out there, um, way, way beyond, like, in at distances beyond the sun that are very difficult for us to imagine, where it takes light so long to reach. We're still able to since the planets that exist out there, the Titan sized ones, because they are so big and therefore they exert real power. Um, they emit light, they reflect light, even if it isn't visible to our eyes because the rest of the light in the sky is competing with it. You need to have a telescope to be able to see anything past Saturn. But Saturn you can see in the sky. You can look up on an app or something and see where it is anytime. Um, really, the best way to connect with the planetary consciousness I find is to find out where it is in the sky, and if it you can actually see it in the sky sometime within the next few days, just try and see if you can hang around and look at it, because once you're able to just look at the planet in the sky, and of course this is with the seven visible planets in quotations of alchemy, which means five of them are actually planets. Um, but one is the moon, so that's I'd say six things you can look for in the sky. I'm just saying that if it's the sun, it's really easy if it's the sun, guys. Um, sorry. Excuse me, I'm going to cough again. What a wonderful experience. So, if you see the planet in the sky, you actually have something to look at while you just start thinking towards it and saying, honestly, the best thing to do is just say hello. They love to hear hello. They're not often just talked to or recognized because so many humans on this planet right now believe that there's nothing out there to listen to us. Um, and something out there wants to talk, and I'm not even saying that it wants to like get the coordinates so it can come attack all of our military bases. I'm saying like just hello is enough to tide it over for like 10 years. So like I don't know. I, it sounds kind of like we would be if we wanted something to reach out to us. You know, um I think that humans would be super excited to hear hello, um and nothing else, even as much as we can get paranoid and kind of trigger happy about some things. Like, I think we as a species are actually optimists, and I think it would be wonderful for us to start talking to someone else from outside this planet so that we can start getting some perspective on who we are and some perspective on who we could be. So, until we get to talk to aliens in person, or over the internet or whatever, I think that reaching out to the planetary consciousnesses is one of the few ways that you can actually talk to an alien. Talk to certainly it's extraterrestrial. It is outside of Terra. Um, it's just very big. Um, I'd say my suggestion is Jupiter is very good to start with because very visible in the sky, very easy to track. Mercury, I'd say, is a great starter planet. Starter planet. Everybody always asks me for starter spirits. So if you want to start with any of them, I'd say start with Mercury because Mercury represents communication, and is kind of like the first, second, and third mage, um, and so can therefore teach you all sorts of magic. Um, Mercury is focuses very much on education. Also, Mercury travels very fast, has an 88-day orbit. Um, in a DeLorean, I'm sure. And so, since it travels so fast, um, if you're kind of a beginner, a lot of times you kind of don't want to plod along and such. So, I'd say that Mercury will probably be your speed. Mercury's good for people who are just starting out because, like, vast, talkative, um, and very interesting perspectives always. Jupiter is very good as well. Um, you get a lot of prosperity bonuses if you work with Jupiter. And Jupiter is very jovial, literally. Um, so you you will have an easy time talking to Jupiter. All of them are good to talk to. I'd say the biggest thing about Venus and Mars is don't limit them to what people have stereotyped them as. Venus as beauty, and love also represents truth. Um, and um, beauty and truth can actually encompass things like math and intellectualism, art, um, architecture, justice, and law. Um, so I find that people really identify Aphrodite as a floozy who is just looking for more fun and more parties. And I think that's just what she's looking for on Friday nights. But um, she's considered to be the blade of truth for some people. Um, and that makes her fierce in her own right. So Venus is actually a very intellectual planet. Its associative element is air, and therefore its like suit in the tarot would be swords, um, and that's the mental suit. That's the mental pursuits. So Venus is very reflective. The sword, double edged, has many angles of reflection for you, and Venus is very dangerous. Venus can be deadly. Then we have Mars. Mars is often regarded as just a god of bloodthirstiness, and that is not what Mars is. The Romans and the Greeks both valued war soldiers, the military, and generals very highly, and military conquest was considered one of the higher ideals. So Mars was looked to for tactics, um, and foresight. Mars would have been a model sun, who would have been like a soldier, but also um, a very intelligent and highly skilled with a big future ahead of him. Mars is also a planet of desire. It's actually a planet of desire more than it is Venus, because Venus knows that people are going to come to it. Um, Venus knows that people desire it, whereas Mars acts on its desires. So it's that acting on its desires part that I think people consider to be very warlike. But really, it's more like, that planet wants to start a war in bed sometimes. And that's why Mars and Venus often go very well together. And of course, in mythology, they're quite often secretly having an affair together, but they are not married to each other. Um, that's quite a big deal, in fact. um, so Saturn is a very fun planet. It's the goth planet, planet of intellectuals. Um, Intellectuals, different than with Mercury. This is going to be very much book learning and book knowledge. Um, More about your PhD than your undergrad, in terms of degrees. More about your PhD and then your bachelor's. You get your bachelor's over on Mercury. Um, Over on Saturn is where you're getting your graduate degrees, and it's also where you'd have the giant library. Saturn is often about history, agriculture, civilization, the ongoing survival of civilization, leadership for that, harvest, um, death, farming, um, just really the parts of life as a human that don't just come as natural instinct, that take a lot of training. What Saturn is really about is generational learning. It's the recipes for things that you didn't know how to make, but your family passes down to you, and now you can pass that down to anyone that you want, and that's been passed down for, say, 100 years or something. That recipe is generational knowledge, and it was preserved so that you can have it now. But without the generations preserving it for you before you got it, you wouldn't have that knowledge at all. And um, it's quite heavy to realize that you're able to eat because someone who's been dead for 50 years figured out how to make biscuits in a novel way. Um, Saturn is very much about family care, um, uh, medical assistance. Saturn's very much a doctor planet just as much as Mercury is. Saturn really wants the whole household to get along. You might consider Saturn to be a big patriarch. Saturn actually is a big patriarch in mythology, and so is Jupiter. So, sometimes they don't get along because, in fact, Jupiter defeated Saturn in their respective mythology to be in charge of the cosmos. Um, I think that gives you an idea of what it's like to connect with these entities. I say entities, but they're like the sum total of a planet's entire living experience and also mineral experience, just a planet's entire existence on all levels of consciousness. So it's not like you're talking with any one being that ever existed. It's like you're talking with a sea of consciousness that's always changing. And it is very humbling in that you realize that you'll last just about as long as they do. But it's also really awe inspiring because you realize that they're all lasting forever. Um, you'll find that whoever surfaces to talk to you or whatever surfaces to talk to you will often be very relevant to you very specifically. Like calls to like. We call this concept nearest neighbor. So whatever's closest to you will usually be the first thing to show up. Um, Good luck, have fun, and remember that you're on this planet. It doesn't really matter what planet you're talking to. You've always got this one here for you.